welcome back to our podcast. I'm the Disturbed Southern Belle.
And I'm the Gentleman.
We're continuing on with our series of some of the dark stories, I guess I should say, of Hollywood from some of the old Hollywood stories. And this week we're going to be talking about, or this episode rather, I should say, Montgomery Clift. So, a little description of him. Montgomery Clift was said to have the most earnest of faces, these big pleading eyes, a set jaw, and the sort of immaculate side part we haven't seen since. So he was supposed to have this beautiful hair and this craziness. Now, he was a very attractive man, I won't lie. I've seen pictures of him. He was definitely not an ugly person. He played the desperate, the drunken, and the deceived. And the trajectory of his life was as tragic as that in any of his films. A car crash in the prime of his career left him in constant pain, and he drank himself to an early death. There's even some that even say he had like a long unaliving of himself, so to speak. You know, kind of that might have been what he was going for. Didn't care, in other words.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's true, but anyway. So he created an aesthetic of suffering that has guided the way we think about him today. But for 12 years, he set Hollywood aflame. From the start, Clift was framed as a rebel and an individual. When he first arrived in Hollywood, he didn't sign a contract, waiting until after the success of his first 2 films to negotiate a 3-picture deal with Paramount that allowed him total discretion over projects. So very smart, actually. He didn't just initially sign with them. He actually made sure that he had a successful film, a couple of films out. Then he had something to bargain with, basically.
Right.
So that was actually very smart of him. It was unheard of, especially for a young star, but it was a seller's market. If Paramount wanted him, they'd have to give him what he wanted, which was a powerful differential that would go on to structure the star-studio relationship for the next 40 years. When the press talked about Clift, they talked about the skill and the beauty, but they also talked about what an offbeat, weird guy he was. He insisted on maintaining his residence in New York, spending as little time in Hollywood as possible. His apartment, which he rented for $10 a month, was described by friends as beat up and by him as terrific, which is very weird for a Hollywood star, you know, living in this kind of little shambly apartment, you know what I'm saying? Just not heard of. So he survived on 2 meals a day, mostly a combinations of steak, eggs, and orange juice. And he eschewed nightclubs instead of spending his spare time reading and things like that. When he wasn't reading or exhausting himself in preparation for a part, he liked to go to the local night court and attend high-profile court cases just to watch the humanity on display. So, in other words, he didn't like going out on the nightlife either. He was kind of frugal, and he stayed at home and read. And then for fun, he went to the local night court and watched the cases. So, a free entertainment, I guess, right?
Right.
So, Clift cared nothing for appearances. The Los Angeles Times called him the rumpled movie idol. He infamously owned only one suit, and when he came to visit storied fan magazine author Elsa Maxwell at her home, she had her maid darn the elbow in his jacket. Because it was all worn out, so he done wore the elbow out. His beat-up car was 10 years old, and his best friends were all outside of the movie business. He was, in his words, nothing more than an ordinary second-class wolf. So he was very, very odd.
Yeah.
He had an old car. So. He had one suit that was so bad when he went for an interview, the maid at the place actually fixed the elbow. So that is odd.
It is very much so.
Yeah. So these anecdotes and dozens like them would establish Clift, along with Brando, as the embodiment of the 50s youth culture, rebelling against conformity and all that post-war Americans were supposed to embrace. Yet Clift would come to hate the image that constrained him, just as he hated the suggestion that he was a slob, unfriendly, or loathed in Hollywood. After the story of his bare closet came out in the Saturday Evening Post, he worked arduously to set the record straight, underlying how publicity takes a kernel of the truth and expands it into legend. Very true.
Yeah, not wrong at all.
No, and he's not wrong at all. No, they don't half the time even have even a kernel of the story. He's right. Just nothing. Just some little passing thing completely out of context, and they just run with it.
Yeah.
In his words, I learned that most writers don't need interviews to write about me. They seem to have their stories all written out beforehand. So that just, yeah, exactly. Clift's private life was boring. He didn't date. He didn't flirt. He didn't hang out in public. His image was more than anything else confusing, unmalleable to Hollywood's pre-existing star categories. But he was handsome and beguiling on screen, creating appetite for confrontation of that same Clift off the screen. So the fan magazines got created. The August 1949 cover of Movieland, for example, featured a grinning, suited, respectable-looking Clift paired with a tantalizing headline, "Making Love the Clift Way." No. But when readers looked inside the magazine, all they found was a two-page spread of stills from the heiress featuring Clift in various stages of flirtation with Olivia de Havilland, exploiting that Clift's kissing style was soft yet possessive, brutal, pleading, but demanding all. So they just made up something.
Didn't we cover de Havilland in an earlier episode?
She was mentioned anyway, but yeah.
Yeah.
It was a flimsy speculation built on shaky evidence, but had with no sign of any real lovemaking in Clift's life. It was all the fan magazines had. Indeed, it was his apparent lack of romantic attachments that confounded the gossip press the most. He had a close friendship with a woman named Myra Letts, whom some columnists tried arduously to frame as a love interest, but Clift's rebuttal was firm, emphasizing that they were neither in love nor engaged. They'd known each other for 10 years. She helped him with his work, and those romantic rumors are embarrassing to both of us. He was also close with stage actress Libby Hallman, 16 years his senior, who had become a notorious feature in the gossip columns following the suspicious death of her wealthy husband and her rumors of lesbianism that were going around her. In which, you know how that would have been back in those days. Jeez Louise. And her general practice of dating younger men. Clift was so protective of Hallman that when offered the plum role of the male lead in Sunset Boulevard, he turned it down reportedly to avoid any suggestion that Libby Hallman was his own delusional Norma Desmond, using a handsome young man to pursue her lost stardom. Nah. Clift was unperturbed by his apparent lack of a love life. He told the press that he would get married when he met a girl he wanted to marry. In the meantime, he was playing the field. When another columnist asked him if he had any hobbies, he replied, yes, women. But as the years passed, it became more and more clear that Clift wasn't just picky. He was, at least in the press, something approaching asexual. And maybe he was, who knows. The title of a motion picture article authored by Clift declared it simply, "I like it lonely." Now, there's been some rumors also that he was gay, and he may have been that as well. And you know how that was frowned upon back in those days. I mean, it was just stupid, but it was what it, was.
It was
back
what
in,
it was,
back in those days. Yeah, exactly. So, the unspoken truth was that Clift was gay. The revelation of his sexuality did not emerge until the 70s, when two high-profile biographers, one endorsed by the close confidants, revealed as much, rendering him a gay icon within the span of 2 years. Now, it's kind of sad back in those days because there was a few that were, supposedly, well, I'll say supposedly because, I don't know. They never openly came out, but it was pretty well known that they were gay, but they couldn't live their lives like that. And, and the sad thing is you can kind of see it because back in those days, it was so frowned upon. But at the same time, you think they could have done it more privately and just kept it out of the public eye. But apparently, they just didn't want.
Apparently not, yeah.
So today, it's impossible to know the specifics of Clift's sexuality. His brother Brooks would later claim that his brother was bisexual. That's possible too. While various writings from within Hollywood indicate that Clift's sexuality wasn't entirely a secret. And Truman Capote's unpublished novel Answered Prayers, for example, the author imagines a dinner party between Clift, Dorothy Parker, and a flamboyant stage actress, Tallulah Bankhead. "He's so beautiful," murmured Miss Parker, "sensitive, so finely made, the most beautiful young man I've ever seen. What a pity he's a cocksucker." Then sweetly wide-eyed with little girl naivety, she said, Oh dear, have I said something wrong? He is a cocksucker, isn't he, Tallulah?" Miss Bankhead said, "Well, darling, I really wouldn't know. He's never sucked my cock." Well, fair enough, considering that she's, female too. So, I don't know. I don't know if he was gay or not for sure. It was just one of these things that kind of came out after. I don't know if he was. He may have been one of these asexual people. He may have been bisexual. I have no clue. And who cares? But, it was a big deal, of course, because for Hollywood, they had to know. Other testimonies to Clift's gayness abound. Early in his film career, he had purportedly been warned that being gay would ruin him. He was so conscious of being seen as feminine or fey in any way that he ad-libbed a line in The Search calling a boy dear. He insisted that director Fred Zinnemann reshoot the take. Clift's sexuality, like those of other 50s idols like Rock Hudson and Tab Hunter, Rock Hudson was another big one that was, supposedly gay.
Yeah.
Was carefully concealed from the public. But that didn't mean that the gossip press didn't hint at something different, something queer in the broadest sense of the word about him. Just look at the fan magazine titles: Making Love the Clift Way, Two Loves Has Monty, Monty Clift's Tragic Love Story. Is it true what they say about Monty? Who is Monty kidding? He's traveling light. The lurid life of Montgomery Clift, and perhaps more flagrantly, Monty Clift, woman hater or free soul. Benign to most, but in hindsight, highly suggestive. Well, yeah, and kind of mean in a ways too.
Yeah.
Whatever relationships Clift may have had, he was circumspect. Unlike Rock Hudson, whose affairs were very nearly exposed to the entire nation by Confidential, Clift never made the pages of the scandal rags. He was lonely, yet with the help of his refusal to live in Los Angeles or participate in cafe society, he was able to keep his private life private. So in other words, he didn't go out around town, and all that, blah, blah, blah.
He wasn't the gallivanting
Exactly.
type.
He wasn't. So Clift earned Best Actor Oscar nominations for 1951's A Place in the Sun and 1953's From Here to Eternity. Both times he lost to older actors Humphrey Bogart and William Holden, respectively, and established his reputation alongside Marlon Brando and James Dean as a young outsider whose talent intimidated Hollywood. After Eternity, he dropped out of Hollywood for several years and signed a 3-year contract with MGM in 1955 to make Raintree County, which reunited him with his Place in the Sun co-star Elizabeth Taylor. The script wasn't necessarily that special, but would give him a chance to reunite with Elizabeth, and that was enough to pull him out of his semi-retirement. He wanted to act with her again, basically.
Right.
Taylor had married British actor Michael Wilding in 1952, but by 1956, their marriage was in decline. During the filming of Raintree County, Clift and Taylor seemed to have rekindled their is it or isn't it relationship. So there was kind of rumors that they kind of had something going on. And maybe they did. Like I said, we have no clue. According to one of Clift's biographers, some days he would threaten to stop seeing Elizabeth Taylor, then the thought would make him burst into tears. Another legend has Taylor sending Clift piles of love letters, which he then read aloud to his male companion at the time. So, you know what I'm saying? There's both sides. Who knows? These are all just people talking. We don't know if any of this is even true. They could have made all this up just to
very well could have
get their 15 minutes in the light, We can't know what happened or if the two ever had a relationship that went beyond the platonic, but it was returning from a party at Taylor's house mid-filming for Raintree County that he smashed his car into a telephone pole. Moments after the accident, actor Kevin McCarthy, driving in front of Clift, ran back to check on him, seeing that his face was torn away, a bloody pulp, he said.
Jesus.
I thought he was dead. McCarthy ran to fetch Taylor, Wilding, and Rock Hudson and Hudson's wife, Phyllis Gates, who all raced to the side of the accident. What happened next is somewhat fuzzy. One version has Hudson pulling Clift from the car and Taylor cradling him in her arms, at which point Clift started choking and motioning to his throat, where it became clear 2 of his teeth had lodged themselves after coming loose during the accident.
That is brutal.
It is. Taylor opened his mouth, put her hand down his throat, and pulled out the teeth. True or not, the resilience of the story is a testimony to what people wanted to believe about the bond between the two stars. According to this version of the story, when photographers arrived, Taylor announced that she knew each one of them personally, and if they took pictures of Clift, who was still very much alive, she'd make sure they never worked in Hollywood again. Regardless of the veracity of this story, one thing remains true. There's not a single picture of his broken face. So maybe that is true.
Quite possibly.
According to Clift's doctors, it was amazing that he was even alive. But after an initial flurry of coverage, he retreated from the public view entirely. Months of surgeries, rebuilding, and physical therapy followed. Production resumed on Raintree County, which the studio feared would fail following Clift's accident. But Clift knew the film would be a smash, if only because Alex audiences would want to compare his long, unseen face from before and after the accident, and that's probably true. In truth, yeah, exactly. In truth, his face wasn't truly disfigured. It was, however, much older by the time Raintree County made its way to theaters. He'd been off the screen for 4.5 years, but the facial reconstruction, heavy painkiller use, and rampant alcohol abuse made it look like he had aged a decade, which is kind of sad.
It is.
And thus begun what Robert Louis, Clift's teacher at the Actors Studio, called the longest unaliving of someone in Hollywood history. So this is, the slow.
Yeah.
Even before Raintree, the decline had been visible. Author Christopher Isherwood tracked Clift's decline in his journals, and by August 1955, he was drinking himself out of a career. On the set of Raintree, the crew had designated words to communicate how drunk Clift was. Bad was Georgia, very bad was Florida, and the worst of all was Zanzibar. Nearly all his good looks are gone, Isherwood wrote. He has a ghastly, shattered expression, and it wasn't just in private records. In October 1956, Luella Parsons reported on Clift's very bad health and Holman's attempts to clean him up. His decline was never explicitly evoked, but with his visage in Raintree County, it was there for all to see. While filming his next picture, Lonely Hearts, in 1958, Clift lashed out, proclaiming, "I am not, repeat, not a member of the Beat Generation. I am not one of America's angry young men. I do not count myself as a member of the ripped sweatshirt fraternity." He wasn't a young rebel, an old rebel, a tired rebel, or a rebellious rebel. All he cared about was recreating a slice of life on the screen. He was sick of being a symbol, a synonym, a symptom, a testament to something. In The Young Lions in 1958, released just 2 years after his accident, the pain and resentment seemed almost visible. It'd be his only film with Brando, even though the two barely shared the screen. Taylor, at least free from her long-standing contract with MGM, used her power as the biggest star in Hollywood to insist that Clift be cast in her new project Suddenly last summer in 1959. It was a huge wager since everyone knew how much booze and pills he was on at the time. He was visually virtually uninsurable on the set, but the producer, Sam Spiegel, decided to go forward no matter the risk. The results were not pretty. Clift couldn't get through longer scenes, having to split them up into 2 or 3 chunks. The subject matter, which involved him assisting in the cover-up of a dead man's apparent homosexuality, must have sparked mixed emotions. The director tried to replace him, but Taylor and co-star Katharine Hepburn defended him and supported him. Hepburn was reportedly so incensed by the director's treatment of Clift that when the film officially wrapped, she found the director and spat in his face. So, the decline continued. Clift appeared in The Misfits, which is this Western best known as the final film of Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable. The director, John Huston, supposedly brought Clift in because he thought he'd have this soothing effect on Monroe, who was deeply embroiled in her own addictions with her own personal demons. But even Monroe reported that Clift was the only person I know who is in even worse shape than I am. So, The pictures from the set are as poignant as they are heartbreaking. It's as if all 3 of them were meditating on their respective declines. And there's a sad, peaceful resignation at the difference between what their bodies could do and how people wanted to remember them. But 1961 audiences were too close to the day-to-day deterioration of its stars to see the meditative genius of The Misfits. It's also a dark, melancholy film, as a review in The Variety pointed out. The complex mass of introspective conflicts, symbolic parallels, and motivational contradictions were so nuanced as to seriously confound general audiences who were likely unable to cope with the philosophical undercurrents of the Arthur Miller script. Or Bosley Crowther, taking the populist slant in the New York Times, explained, "The characters were amusing, but they were also shallow, and that is the dang busted trouble with this film. Whether morally repulsive or philosophically compelling, The Misfits bombed only to be recuperated years later as a masterpiece of the revisionist genre." Looking back, the film had a legacy of darkness surrounding it. Gable died of a heart attack less than a month after filming. Monroe was only able to attend the film's premiere with a pass from her stay at a psychiatric ward. She wouldn't die for another year and a half, but The Misfits was her last completed film. As for Clift, the shoot was incredibly taxing, both mentally and physically. In addition to acquiring a scar across his nose from a stray bull's horn, severe rope burns while attempting to tame a wild horse, and various other rough and tumble injuries, he also performed, which was widely to be regarded as one of the best scenes, a stilted, heartbreaking conversation with his mother from a phone booth. Even Clift himself was already spiraling out of control, playing a character that did the same only amplified the psychological toll. Following The Misfits, Clift's disintegration continued. He was such a mess on the set of Freud 1962 that Universal sued him. While filming a 15-minute supporting role as a mentally handicapped victim of the Holocaust in Judgment at Nuremberg in 1961, he had to ad-lib all of his lines. But something of the old talent remained, or at least enough to earn Clift a nomination for Best Supporting Actor, playing, in the words of a film critic, David Thompson, a very irreparably damaged by suffering. Plans for Clift to play the lead in the film adaptation of Carson McCullers' The Heart is a Lonely Hunter fell through, in large part due to his insurability on the set and promises of a fourth collaboration with Taylor. This time, the producer Ray Stark never came to pass. Between 1963 and 1966, he faded from public view, emerging only to film a final performance in the French spy thriller The Defector, but before the film could be released, he passed away, wholly without fanfare at the age of 45, succumbing to years of drug and alcohol abuse. Taylor caught up in filming with Richard Burton in Paris, sent flowers to the funeral. The long unaliving was complete. Many Hollywood stars have committed versions of the long unaliving, as they call. Biographies of Clift posted that he drank because he couldn't be his true self, because homosexuality was a shame he had to shelter within. But if you look at his other words, his testimonies about what acting did to him, you'll see the culprit. His perpetual question to himself, as he once scribbled in his journal, was how to remain thin-skinned, vulnerable, and still alive. For Clift, the task proved impossible. He once said, "The closer we come to the negative, to death, the more we blossom." He took himself to that precipice, but he fell straight in, and so he remains frozen in the popular imagination circa From Here to Eternity, those high cheekbones, that set jaw, the firm stare, a magnificent, proud, tragically broken thing to behold. So he had, sad.
Yeah.
Very sad, and unfortunately, that living fast, dying young kind of thing sort of unfortunately happens to a lot of Hollywood stars.
It was and still is exceptionally common.
It's sad, and I get kind of what they're saying, whether it had anything to do with his sexuality, I have no clue. It could have just definitely been just because you're always in the public eye, and some people they think they can handle it, but they can't unless they actually get there.
And they eventually get so burnt out that they just can't handle it anymore.
Exactly.
And they drink or do drugs and just drive themselves into the ground.
Exactly. Because they're constantly hammering them. They're constantly looking for flaws. They're constantly picking. So, It would be a lot. But anyway, we hope you enjoyed that segment. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And don't forget to stay disturbed.